let us bring our hearts and minds together to think about all those scriptures that you heard. You heard the psalmist take responsibility for his transgressions that he hid from God in the dark and in the silence. He said, I will bring them before you and I will confess them to you. You heard about the people of Israel who have been wandering for 40 years, finally settling on the other side of the Jordan River, outside of Jericho, remembering Passover and what got them through. These people who were wandering for 40 years because of their transgressions are finally in a space where they can reconcile with God and be ready to be the new creature that God's created them to be. And then we have Paul talking about reconciliation. Reconciliation. When people come together in peace and unity and reunify. And we are called to do that because Christ reconciles us to God. And then we can reconcile others to God as well. And then, of course, Jesus does it really well. He doesn't make it philosophical like Paul. He doesn't do wanderings and musings over 40 years, and he doesn't just sit in the temple and think about what it means for him. Jesus tells them a story about a young man who wants his own so he can go out and make his way in the world. But I want to just take a few minutes of your time to think about the constant fear of reconciliation. I said that sermon title to a friend of mine yesterday, and she said, fear of reconciliation? Let's think about this and be very honest with ourselves. It is a frightening thing when you have to face up to who you are and all that has happened so that you can be reconciled with it and let it go. It is a hard thing to face one's trauma, to face the pain that one has caused, and to not only bring it to the other person, but to bring it to God. And I know so many people who know intellectually that God knows everything. God already knows, and yet people cannot say out loud what it is that has distanced them from God. And by not saying it out loud, it is in fact hiding. And in fact, hiding is distancing yourself even further from God, which is upsetting God, which makes God sad. I believe one of the biggest reasons behind anger and fear, of course, is sadness. So when God shoved Adam and Eve out of the garden, God was sad because they hid their sin from him. When I was in Cape May, we used to do mediation and anger management for kids in junior high school and freshmen. We would do a refresher course when they were freshmen in high school. So imagine taking an entire class for 2 days and teaching them methodologies on how to mediate and reconcile with one another. Teenagers, you stole my boyfriend. Well, let's have a mediation and really figure out what this means. But some of the tools that we use to talk with them about this, we use Jane Elliott. And Jane Elliott is the white woman who goes around and talks about the fact that, she did the brown-eyed, blue-eyed experiment when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was killed. And she said, you got blue eyes? Oh, then you're not worth my time. You got brown eyes? Oh, you're wonderful. And then after days, the kids started turning on one another. And you could see their pain and turning against their friends who were friends yesterday. And then this delectable joy because you had the opportunity to have an upper hand on somebody. It's our human nature And then there's another video that we use of this person that was doing a racial conversation at this retreat center in the hills of California. And I will never forget one of the major interactions. It was a burly white guy who was sitting there, and he was just sort of rocking back and forth, and black folk and Asian folks and Hispanic folk were sitting there talking about all of the injustices. And this man stood up and says, I don't know why you are all complaining about this all the time. All you got to do is like what we've done, is pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and get going. You got to forget all of that and leave it behind. And then the African-American man stood up, and he was visibly hurt and angry that his trauma had been so minimalized that he said to him, you always say that, but you're the ones that have control of the boots and the stores that sell the boots. You cut my straps up so that I can't even pull myself up by my bootstraps. My boots don't have straps. I'm wearing sandals. Or else I'm walking around in barefoot and socks, and you're telling me to pull myself up by my bootstraps? And then, of course, what ends up happening is that people started backing away because they're like, oh, he's an angry black man. But the burly white man did and said something that clicked for me to this day. He started crying. And he said, I've never been able to say this out loud. But the main reason why I don't want to face what it is that you're talking about is because I belong to a people that have done this to you. And he fell apart and fell in tears into his seat. He said, this guilt of the 400 years of what we've done in this country, the African Americans, what we've done to the natives, what we've done in the name of progress, it weighs heavy on my inside, and I've never spoken it before. And it was only then in this workshop, with this confession, did the reconciliation around race start to happen. Painful, painful stuff. Yet it is painful to let go of your trauma and your burdens and even your shackles. We said in Bible study on Monday, 40 years in the wilderness. Why? I tell them all the time, if they would have taken a right, they would have gotten there much sooner, but God had them take a left. Because they had to have 40 years and generations to figure out how to take those shackles that had bound them and to leave them in the wilderness before they could be reconciled to God. We all have to let go of our shackles and leave them in the wilderness. This reconciliation thing, biblical reconciliation, can be thought of as the process of two previously alienated parties coming to peace with one another. Paul's talking to the Corinthians, of course, these Corinthian people who are fighting in and of their own community. He's like, you have to be reconciled to one another. The world outside is against you. You got to reconcile on the inside. Because God has reckoned God's self to us through Jesus Christ. We must reconcile with one another. No longer counting our offenses against one another. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Because isn't that what God does with us? When God reconciles God's self to us, what God says is, I know your sin. I know your struggle. And I have forgiven you. I don't hold it against you. Because I don't need anything coming in between us. So I am erasing it. That's reconciliation. That's the work that Paul is talking about. And not only do we become ambassadors for Christ, I want you to understand something about this word ambassadors. When you are a reconciler, an ambassador in the time of Paul was like Pilate. who was the governor put in place by Rome to rule a country. God is giving us the power of reconciliation to rule in God's way and in God's will of bringing peace to one another. That is a Christian duty. Reconciliation. So when you hear about churches having fights, when you hear about people talking about God said that you shouldn't do this and I'm going to hate you because of it, blah, 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 that is not reconciling anybody to God. It is not bringing peace. It is not saying that I understand that you're a human being and that we all sin. And I'm not going to hold it against you because we need to grow in God and you need to build your journey with God. And that's what I'm an ambassador for. All the good things that God can bring you when you come to God, that's all I'm here to tell you about. And it's a mighty fine gift, I'm telling you. Sin. When Christ reconciles Christ's to us, he takes our sin. He who was born without sin takes our sin. But it's more than just the actions that we do. It's more than partying too late on a Saturday night and forgetting to come up into church on Sunday morning. It's more than cheating at a game of spades. It's more than treating someone like dirt who used to be your friend and bullying and talking about that. Sin in Greek in this text is the word hamartia. And the Greek word hamartia is much more complicated than just the actions that we do as sin. Hamartia is basically, I want you to think about it like a tragic flaw. Did you know that when Aristotle was writing the Poetics about how to write theater and how to write drama, and you'll notice this in practically every protagonist, every good person in a movie that overcomes something, they have this tragic flaw. It is something that they take on that is theirs, that has the possibility to end them. And they have to reconcile with that tragic flaw. Before the play ends, or before the movie ends, think Oedipus Rex, as we said in Bible study. And here is the thing about the tragic flaw. It really has nothing to do with you. It's how you take on that tragic flaw and how you take on the thing that is presented in your life that will bring you down, and how you own it and how you get rid of it. Oedipus ripped out his eyes after realizing that he killed his father and married his mother. And that was of no doing of his own. His father sent him off. He had no idea that his father was the king. He had no idea that the Queen Jocasta was his mother. He just happened to answer the Sphinx and go into this town and ended up becoming the ruler. But he took it on. He took it on and said, I will take responsibility for what I've done. So, I tell you all of this intellectual property, all this stuff about Aristotle and the Poetics and hamartia in Greek, is because he who was without sin took our tragic flaws that were meant to destroy us, to kill us, to ruin us, to put us under the ground and deeper down into the depths of hell. Jesus took our tragic flaw upon himself and died on the cross to reconcile us. This is the hamartia. This is the sin. He took away everything that could destroy us to give us the opportunity to reconcile with God. Do you get that, how that works now? Everything that can possibly destroy us, be it our drug addiction, be it our alcoholism, be it our sex addiction, be it our money addiction, no matter what it is, Christ is able to take that flaw and says, here's an opportunity for it to not destroy your life. All you got to do is reconcile yourself to me and bring it to God. I've already paid the price for it so that you don't have to die, that you can live. It is a powerful, powerful thing that Paul is talking about here. And Jesus makes it even more clear with this prodigal son. Prodigal son, knowing that his brother, at this time period, that when their father dies, that he's going to get double the share of the inheritance because he's the older brother. He says, give me mine now. The idea is that I'm going to go and spend this, and I'm going to double it myself. Maybe his thought. But when you're not home out on the farm and you get to the big city, your money doesn't go as far. Because there are other things that tempt you. His brother is worried about him messing around with prostitutes. Not because he was messing around with prostitutes, but because he's spending his father's money to do it. His brother is worried about him sitting around the table with people drinking that aren't Jewish, and people partying and doing other things, and people who are worshiping other gods. Sounds a little bit like the Pharisees, doesn't it? Telling Jesus, you're sitting with the sinners. So I am condemning you and judging you on that. Well, this son finally spends everything, and wouldn't you know it, there's a famine in the land. Wouldn't you know it that we have some of the best economic times in the United States of America, and then a pandemic comes. We have some of the best economic times in the United States of America, and then bird flu comes and eggs skyrocket. We have some of the best economy in the United States of America, and a new president comes and dismantles all of that was done to give that surplus to someone else, and brings in someone on his side who hates the idea of reconciliation. Because what happened when apartheid fell in South Africa? They didn't take the people that were so cruelly manifesting their authority over one another. What they did is they had truth and reconciliation. And they brought the oppressors in front of those that they oppressed and said, speak your truth so that we can reconcile and start this nation anew and be a new creation. Why is it that this country that started a new creation, why is it that one of their own white folks said, I do not agree with this process of reconciliation, so I'm going to go to another country to make my money. I'm going to take my South African philosophy of apartheid. I'm going to take my South African sense of ownership and privilege, and I'm going to go to the United States. And I'm going to found a company called Tesla. And I'm going to do this. And I'm going to be so bold as to say that I can make my own space program, but it's all based on a philosophy of not reconciling for peace. So now we have not only two people that are setting up an entire structure that goes against everything that this scripture is talking about with reconciliation, and everything that was going well, and now we are in our own famine. So what does the son do? When he comes to himself, it says, right? You know, even the slaves and the workers at my father's, they have bread to spare, and my stomach, what does that say? My stomach is touching my backbone. And so he goes home, and he knows that in order to go home, that he must do his true confession. I have sinned against you, and I am not worthy to be called your son. Just put me to work in the fields. And he goes home. So, where are we? We're in the midst of the famine, y'all. It's time to go back home. It's time to come back home. It's time to come back to community. It's time to come back to church. It's time to come back and say, I have sinned by partaking in all of this, and I am ready to start over. Because what's going to happen is that you don't have to say to God, just, I'll be humble and be a worker. You don't have to. God's going to run to you and say, welcome home. I thought you were dead, but you're alive. I thought you were lost, and you have been found. This whole idea of the cloak, the Father gives him three things, right? Gives him three things: signet ring, cloak, and sandals. Those are not just this beautiful thing, like, oh, let's get them all dressed up. It has symbolism to it. In Zephaniah, there was a priest named Yeshua who is mistreated and has all of these things that are weighed on him, that are thrown upon him and thrust upon him. And when his salvation comes, they take his clothes off and put him in a new robe, because the putting on of a new robe signifies letting go of your sin. I got a new robe waiting in glory, and it's mine, all mine. Means that you have been seen in a new way, in a new creation. All of that is behind you. The signet ring. Joseph was given a signet ring by Pharaoh, remember? So that should prove that he had authority in the household. And the father knows very well that his son, who has been almost a slave to someone else, has nothing on his feet. Slaves walk around barefoot in this time period. Those who belong wear sandals. So not only does the Father reinvest him with authority as a son again, he also takes away his guilt by giving him a new robe. And he also claims him as being home by giving him sandals to wear. Even though he does not have the same inheritance that he had before. But this is what happens when we are reconciled. We are embraced. We are given the items and the symbols that mean that we matter, because we've come home and we've said, I'm sorry. And we are embraced, and life can go on again. In fact, that's when we get to have a party. Because we are back in our place at home. And when you come back into church and you come back into the holy places outside of this world that is crumbling, all of a sudden you will be ready to party, invested with your authority as Christ, as an ambassador of reconciliation. You will be clothed in majesty, and all of your sins will be covered and forgotten. You will have sandals so that you can go out into the world and spread the gospel the way that God needs it to be spread. And yes, you will probably run into a few people who have been here all along. And you will wonder if they're saying, well, how come we're having a party for all these people? I was here every Sunday. Where were you? But see, God, or the Father in this case, also has a reconciliation plan for that. Because he says to the older son, my child, don't you realize that everything I have is yours? Always has been, always will be, and I love you anyway, just like I love your brother anyway. Don't worry about whether it's a goat or a fatted calf. When people start coming back through these doors, it is our job to welcome them with love, to celebrate with raised arms, to have a feast in their presence and say, welcome home. That is the reconciliation that we all deserve. And if in this story Jesus is talking about not just the prodigal son being reconciled, but the older son is reconciled, the household is reconciled, the farm is reconciled, everything is reconciled, and there is peace in the home. The world outside is still suffering a famine. The world outside is still partying and going crazy. But at home, with everyone home again, there is peace. Why are we so afraid of reconciliation? Because we have to own up to what we've done. If America were to own up and to be reconciled with its racist, misogynist, sexist, anti-LGBT, hate, all these isms, if it were to reconcile itself to that, it would have to admit that it knows that it's hurt people, that it's killed people, that it's done things all in the name of profit without caring for people, and that is a hard thing to admit. To see someone as a child of God and equal is difficult when you know that you've treated someone like dirt. But that's the work that you got to do to reconcile. And this fear of reconciliation, that's what the people in power are counting on. See, they're dividing us. If you look very carefully, and it's been done throughout this history of our country, but it's even more clear now in the past couple of months. Since January, it's only been 3 months. And it's been very clear who we're trying to pit against one another. All of these things that are going on is to create divisiveness, not reconciliation. And the funny thing about it is that the best way to dismantle what is happening in this country is for all of us to come together on the same page, recognize each other's value, dignity, and worth, and call up the words of those broken founding fathers. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, endowed by their Creator with liberty and justice for all. The basis of this country's founding is to be these United States. The word itself is reconciliation and reconciling. Bring me your tired and your poor. What we're doing with immigrants now has nothing to do with reconciliation. Bring me your tired and your poor and your hungry, and we will reconcile them to righteousness, to the righteousness of God, to the righteousness of the Father, the one who forgives, the one who loves, the one who makes a feast for us even when we come crawling back from our debauchery. Do you see how these texts all come together? It starts with the psalmist's confession, then with the nation's reconciliation and confession to say, we recognize we made it through, and we're going to remember it by Passover, and the new fruits that are coming up out of the land. And then Paul goes in and says reconciliation is key. When we spoke to Reverend Diane Lacey about that on Monday, it was so powerful to know that there's an entire ministry of people that have come out of prison. And it's not just reconciliation with what they've done. It's reconciliation with what the system has done to them. And that is part of why I think this message of reconciliation, getting over the constant fear of reconciliation, is so important, because we will start taking on all of the anxiety and all of the hatred and all of the misery that is trying to be dumped on us, and we will take it in, and we'll take it in as trauma that we will not be able to let go, and we will hold it for generations. And I'm saying let it go and give it to God and come together and find a new way to be in the world. Come home. Break your constant fear of reconciliation. This is what we are called to do. And if we can do this, I honestly believe that we can all come back home and attend the feast with the fatted calf and say, I thought you were dead. I thought you were gone. I thought that you had given up on being a part of humanity. But you're home. Let us be reconciled to one another, reconciled to God, so that we can be ambassadors of God's righteousness. Beloved God, we thank you for this, the depth of this word today. Not my word, oh God, but your word that comes from the Bible. We thank you that our texts have lined up to help us try to heal ourselves, and knowing that if we just come back to you, that your will is what's best for us. We ask, oh God, that you would let the words of this mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock, our redeemer, and our hiding place. And in you, we are reconciled. Amen and amen. Thanks be to God.